How's it going, everybody? My name's Will from Ghosthack, and on today's production basics video, I'm going to be going over everything about Serum's sub and noise oscillator. Now on the surface, it may seem like Serum is a dual oscillator plugin, especially if you're new to the plugin. You have oscillators A and B right here. And of course, those are the main oscillators that people use to create a sound, but Serum actually has 4 oscillators because you're forgetting the noise and the sub oscillators. Now these oscillators operate a little bit differently and they have a little bit of a different purpose. So today I'm just going to show you how they operate, everything about them. They're really not complicated at all. I'm just going to go over it pretty quickly. So here's the cheese. You see all of these oscillators right here, and you see that oscillator A and B are pretty much the same, and they operate pretty much exactly the same. There's just 2 versions of them. But the sub oscillator and the noise oscillator look very different, and they end up sounding pretty different from these, mainly because they are much more limited than oscillator A and B. It's not just like the exact same oscillator duplicated over. They have very specific purposes, and their purposes are pretty obvious just in the names. The sub oscillator was originally designed to be able to just add a quick sub bass on top of whatever thing you're working on. And the concept behind this would be you'd have a sound, and then you'd cut the sub somewhere in this chain. Let's say I just use this high pass to cut the sub bass because I was doing a bunch of stuff here. I was whipping it around to make my sound, and it made the sub really messy. Then what you would do is you'd flip on the sub, and then you'd hit direct out, and that would allow you to add a singular one-voiced oscillation here. So you would have something like this. But of course, if it's a sub bass, you want it down a couple of octaves actually. So now it's nice and low and deep, and that would layer under this. And that would mean that no matter what you did here to really screw up the frequencies of this oscillator to make a cool sound, you could always have a clean sub bass. And you could of course change the shape if you wanted. We have this singular sine wave. We have this curved sine wave, which has a little more harmonics. And you can see if you take a look here, this is the original sine wave up here. And then when we change it to the curved one, you can see there's a few more harmonics there. It's a little bit thicker. And that's actually very useful for sub basses if you want them to sound rich and, more harmonic and not just sort of weak like just a normal sine wave. So it gives you that option. And of course you have triangle with even more harmonics. We have saw, which you're very familiar with. We have square. And we have a pulse width modulated square wave. Now those last 3, the saw, the square, and the pulse width modulated square wave, are not really there for sub reasons. It's usually pretty impractical to use those as sub bass. However, I'm sure Steve Duda, who designed this plugin, knew that the sub oscillator would be used for more than just only sub bass. It was just a tool added to provide that extra oscillator mainly for that case. And what the direct out means when we enable that is basically it will bypass all of the effects used in Serum. It will bypass this filter and it will bypass all of these effects and will head directly out with the other sound after it's affected. So this will undergo absolutely no processing at all, and that's very helpful if, say, you're cutting the sub in an EQ in Serum like this. Then of course the sub bass would get completely cut out and it would be of no use at all. Now we don't have pitch controls the way we do for these other oscillators, but we do have the octave control, and that's mainly because if you're using this as a sub bass, there's not really much need to change the actual pitch of it other than just the octave that you're playing it at. We have the pan position, which is used a little less in sub bass. You kind of want your sub bass to remain mono, but it's there if you ever need it. And of course we have the level, which is basically the volume. Next up, we're going to get to the noise, and this noise oscillator is a little more complex than the sub, but it's still simpler than this other oscillator A and oscillator B. But the noise layer can be especially useful because it can be used essentially as a sampler, because all this is right here is audio files. These are audio files. When you open up all of these, you have the analog stuff, you have all the stuff that comes with it. I have some other custom noises that I have added to my custom noise library, but they're all audio wave files. So if we take this AC hum 1, that's an audio wave file of some white noise. For example, when we go onto our Serum presets folder and then find the noises, you can find all of these files that you just saw there. You go into analog and you can see all of these are just audio files. Usually pretty short. And what the noise oscillator does is it will take that audio file and will continue to loop it as you're playing notes. And not only can you mess around and experiment with the audio files that they give you, for example, they have some interesting ones here. You can hear how it's looping. You can also throw your own samples in there. All you have to do is find an audio file and drag and drop it right into this area. And they even just have a lot of interesting tonal ones that you can load in as well. Now to the controls, you can see we also have a direct out option, same as a sub bass, which will make the noise bypass all of the effects you add in Serum and just go straight out with the other sounds. But a couple of the things that you have are different are these two buttons right here, one with this little arrow and the other one with this keyboard. This little arrow shows that this audio file will be one-shotted. This is turning it on one-shot mode, so it's not going to loop. It's just going to play through once and then stop. And this button with the keyboard will actually map the noise to the notes that you're playing. See, right now I'm playing a C and it plays this note, but if I go up an octave, no change. It's exactly the same. However, if I hit the keyboard, now I can play this note. It's actually lower now, and I can go up an octave, up another octave. It is sensitive to my keyboard. Now moving on, we have some pretty understandable stuff such as the level, the panning right here, and we also have the pitch, which allows you to kind of key your sample into place. Like, let me just raise the pitch for this. Let's say I liked it right there, and it will still follow the notes that you're playing. But now we come to something interesting, which are these two knobs right here, the phase and the random. And these knobs are very similar to these knobs right here, except they have a pretty different purpose. What these knobs right here do is basically the phase knob states where in this waveform the sound will start. For example, you can see this yellow line. So if I bring it all the way to the beginning, this waveform will always start right at the beginning. But if I bring the phase, say, to the middle, this waveform will always start right in the middle when I hit the note. That is, it will always start there if I have the random down. If I have the random up, then you can see this area, this yellow area growing and growing. And that's basically saying within that area, this sound can start wherever it wants, just at random. Like if I select this bit right here, there could be any point in that little yellow point where the sound will start if I hit a key. It could be any one of those, and it will constantly keep switching because it's at random. But if I bring the random down, then the range is reduced to basically nothing, and the yellow line is the only place where it will start each time. And you wouldn't be able to hear this if I play this because saw waves move so fast, but the same thing happens in this noise oscillator kind of as a sampler. The phase chooses which part of the audio file the sound actually starts at, and then the random decides how big the area is it can randomly start at. So the random is all the way down right now, so there is no random starting. It's all just starting exactly where the phase is, and the phase is all the way down, so it will start at the beginning every time. Like you hear how there's a little bit of a fade in. What if I don't want that fade in? What if I just want it to start straight up? Well, I can bring the phase up and have it start a little later. That's just me starting later and later in the audio file. Or how about this? What if I just want none of the beginning? And I just want that end bit. Well, what I can do is I can find where the end bit is. It probably starts about right there. And then I can bring up this random to about here. And when I brought up this random, it's basically saying anywhere between this range and the very end, the sound can start at. So there isn't really a good visual that Serum gives you for this. But basically, when I hit these different notes, it's starting at different spots in this spectrum. And of course, the random goes from 0 to 100. If I brought the random all the way up to 100, then it would just come back around and you'd have the entire range selected. And in that situation, there's almost no need to change this phase knob because the random has access to the entire length of the audio file. So there is my overview of the noise oscillator and the sub oscillator inside of Serum. I hope if any of this was confusing to you before, some of this might have cleared it up. It can be a little tricky sometimes to grasp some of the concepts that are used in these two oscillators as opposed to the main oscillators, because the main oscillators, oscillator A and B, are a little more visual. It's a little easier to see what's going on versus just turning a knob. And that's partially why I tend attempted to use oscillator A to display the phase and the random knob of the noise oscillator. But I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, leave a like below. And if you have any requests for other production basics tutorials that we can do in the future, let us know in the comments below. We like to clear up any questions that you guys have. And if there's something that's kind of stumping you, maybe you're a beginner or maybe you just haven't figured something out, then we'd love to help you out. And we'd love to hear if there's any kind of basic concepts or tools that you guys need help understanding. So we appreciate all of your support, and I will see you in the next video. Happy producing.